the Lycanthrope's daughter. I never knew my mother. She died when I was just a baby, leaving me with nothing but a locket and a father who was always a bit too quiet, a bit too distant. The kind of man who never spoke about the past, who never told me where I came from or why I sometimes felt like a stranger in my own skin. But as my 18th birthday approached, everything started to change. It began with the dreams, dark, twisted nightmares that I couldn't escape from no matter how hard I tried. In these dreams, I would find myself running through a dense, moonlit forest, my breath coming in ragged gasps, the scent of earth and blood thick in the air. Something was chasing me, something with glowing eyes and teeth like knives. But no matter how fast I ran, it was always there, right behind me, just out of sight. Then one night I stopped running. I turned to face the creature that haunted my dreams. That's when I saw it. This hulking figure, part beast, part man, its eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. It snarled, and I felt something inside me stir, something primal, something that terrified me. But before it could lunge at me, I woke up, drenched in sweat, my heart hammering in my chest. That was the first time I noticed the changes. My senses were sharper, more attuned to things I had never noticed before. The rustling of leaves in the wind, the scent of animals in the woods behind our house. My appetite grew voracious, and I craved meat, raw and bloody. I tried to ignore it, to push it all away, but the more I fought it, the stronger it became. And then there was the locket. I had worn it all my life, a small silver pendant that my father told me never to take off. It had been my mother's, he said, but he never explained what it meant or why it felt so heavy around my neck these days. One night, after another one of those nightmares, I decided to open it. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph of a woman with wild, dark hair and fierce eyes. My mother, and beneath the photograph was a small, folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, I unfolded it, revealing a single word scrawled in a hurried, shaky script: beware. The word sent a shiver down my spine, but it was the sound that followed that truly chilled me to the bone. A low, guttural growl, not from the woods outside, but from within the house. My father's room. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly made my way down the dark hallway, the wooden floor creaking beneath my feet. When I reached his door, I hesitated. The growling had stopped, replaced by heavy breathing, deep and uneven. I pushed the door open a crack and peered inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. There, in the dim light of the room, was my father. Only he wasn't my father anymore. His body was contorted, twisted, covered in coarse black fur. His hands were now claws, and his face, oh God, his face, was a grotesque mix of human and wolf, eyes glowing with the same fire I had seen in my nightmares. He looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw recognition in those eyes, but it was quickly replaced by something else. Hunger. I stumbled back, slamming the door shut, my mind racing. This couldn't be real. This had to be another nightmare. But deep down, I knew the truth. The blood in my veins, the changes in my body, they weren't just random. They were the curse, the same curse that had turned my father into a monster. And now it was my turn. I ran back to my room, locking the door behind me, my hands shaking as I tried to think. There had to be a way out of this, a way to stop the transformation before it was too late. But with each passing night, I could feel the darkness inside me growing stronger, the beast clawing its way to the surface. I couldn't let it win. I wouldn't. But time was running out and the full moon was coming. And so was my 18th birthday. The days blurred together as my 18th birthday drew nearer, each one bringing new horrors that I could no longer deny. The changes were accelerating, my strength was growing, my senses sharper than ever before. But it wasn't just that. It was the anger. A deep, uncontrollable rage that simmered just beneath the surface, threatening to erupt at the slightest provocation. My father, or whatever he had become, was barely human anymore. He spent his days locked in his room, the door barricaded with chains and heavy furniture. At night, I could hear him pacing, growling, and sometimes crying. It was a pitiful sound, one that tore at my heart. But I couldn't help him. I couldn't even help myself. The locket around my neck felt heavier by the day, as if it were pulling me towards something I couldn't yet understand. I spent hours poring over the note, trying to decipher its meaning. Beware. What did it mean? Beware of what? The curse? The full moon? Or was it a warning about something else, something worse? I was running out of time. Desperate for answers, I turned to the one place I had always avoided, the attic. It was filled with old, dusty boxes and forgotten memories, but there was one box that stood out, covered in strange symbols that sent a chill through my veins. It was my mother's, the only thing she had left behind. Inside the box, I found journals filled with frantic handwriting detailing the curse that had plagued our family for generations. My mother had known. She had known what would happen to me, what had happened to my father. She had tried to find a way to break the curse, but her notes ended abruptly, the last entry stained with something dark and ominous. Blood. But there was something else in the box. A small vial of what looked like ashes, tied with a piece of frayed string. Attached to it was a note written in the same hurried script as before. The only way. I didn't understand. Was this the way to break the curse? Or was it something more sinister? My heart raced as I held the vial in my hand, the weight of it filling me with a sense of dread. There was only one person who might have the answers I needed. My father, or the creature he had become. That night, I waited until the house was silent, the darkness pressing in on all sides. The full moon was just days away, and I could feel its pull, a relentless force drawing me closer to the edge. The vial burned in my pocket as I made my way to my father's door. I knocked softly, the sound echoing in the stillness. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time, and heard a low growl from the other side. My heart pounded as I slowly pushed the door open, the chains rattling as I did. He was there, crouched in the corner, his eyes glowing in the darkness. The sight of him made my stomach churn, but I couldn't afford to be afraid. I held up the vial, my hand trembling. "Dad," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What is this? How do I stop it?" For a moment, he didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe. Then slowly, he turned his head toward me, his eyes narrowing. A low guttural sound rumbled from his chest, and I realized he was trying to speak. But the words that came out were garbled, distorted, as if his human mind was fighting against the beast within. "Don't trust her," I froze. Who was he talking about? My mother? Someone else? Before I could ask, he lunged at me, his claws raking the air inches from my face. I stumbled back, dropping the vial as I scrambled to the door. He howled in frustration, the sound echoing through the house as I slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands. The vial lay shattered on the floor, its contents scattered like dust in the wind. Whatever it had been, whatever it was meant to do, was gone. My only hope shattered. As I collapsed against the door, the reality of my situation hit me like a freight train. I was alone. My father was beyond saving, and I was next. The full moon was coming, and when it did, I would become the very thing I feared most. But as I sat there in the dark, I remembered the note in my mother's locket. "Beware." My father's warning echoed in my mind. Don't trust her. I had been so focused on the curse, on what was happening to me, that I hadn't considered the possibility that there was someone else involved, someone pulling the strings. But who? And why? The questions gnawed at me, but I didn't have time for answers. The change was coming, and I could feel it creeping closer with every passing hour. I had to prepare. I had to find a way to control it, to stop myself from becoming a monster. But deep down, I knew it was already too late. The hunt had begun. The nights were becoming unbearable. Each one felt longer, darker, and more suffocating than the last. Sleep was impossible. The nightmares had become my reality. I could feel the beast within me clawing to get out, its hunger gnawing at my sanity. The full moon was only a day away, and with it would come my final transformation. I couldn't stay in the house any longer, not with my father in the state he was. He was nothing more than a caged animal now, driven mad by the curse that had claimed him. I had to leave, to find a way to break the curse before it consumed me too. But where could I go? Who could I turn to? There was only one place left, the woods. The same woods that had haunted my dreams, the same place where the creature had chased me through the shadows. I didn't know what I was looking for, only that something was out there, waiting for me. Something that held the answers I needed, or the end I deserved. I packed a small bag, taking only what was necessary. A flashlight, some food, and the tattered journals I had found in the attic. I left the house quietly, the cold night air biting at my skin as I stepped onto the porch. The woods loomed ahead, dark and foreboding, but I didn't hesitate. There was no turning back now. The trees closed in around me as I ventured deeper into the forest, the path twisting and turning like a living thing. Every sound made me jump, the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a wolf. I tried to stay calm, to keep my mind focused on the task at hand, but the fear was overwhelming. I could feel the beast inside me growing stronger with each step, feeding on my terror. After what felt like hours, I came across a clearing. In the center stood an old, crumbling stone altar covered in moss and ivy. It looked ancient, forgotten by time, yet it radiated a power that sent chills down my spine. This was the place. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. I approached the altar cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I got closer, I saw something glinting in the moonlight, a silver dagger, its blade stained with dark, dried blood. I reached out to touch it, and the moment my fingers brushed the hilt, a wave of memories hit me like a tidal wave. My mother, standing at this very altar, her face pale and drawn. She was holding the dagger, her hands trembling as she chanted words in a language I didn't understand. She wasn't alone. There was someone else with her, a man with piercing eyes and a cruel smile. He whispered something in her ear and she hesitated, tears streaming down her face. But then she nodded, and with a swift motion, she plunged the dagger into her own heart. I gasped, stumbling back from the altar, the vision fading as quickly as it had come. My mother hadn't died in some accident. She had sacrificed herself, trying to break the curse. But why? And who was the man who had been with her? My thoughts were racing when I heard it, a low growl, deep and menacing, coming from the shadows. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The growl grew louder, closer, until finally the creature stepped into the light. It was a wolf, but larger than any I had ever seen, its fur black as night, eyes glowing with a feral intensity. But it wasn't just a wolf, it was more. Its body was twisted, contorted like something caught between man and beast. And then I realized I knew those eyes. "Father," I whispered, my voice trembling. He snarled, his lips pulling back to reveal sharp, blood-stained teeth. He was beyond reason, beyond saving. The curse had consumed him completely. And now it wanted me. I turned and ran, my heart hammering in my chest as I sprinted through the trees. The beast was right behind me, its heavy footsteps pounding the earth. I could feel its hot breath on my neck, its claws reaching for me, ready to tear me apart. I burst into another clearing, nearly tripping over the roots of an old, gnarled tree. I looked around frantically, searching for something, anything, that could help me. That's when I saw her, a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, cloaked in shadows. "Help me!" I screamed, but she didn't move. As I got closer, I could see her face, pale and beautiful, her eyes cold as ice. My mother. Or at least, what was left of her. "You can't run from it," she said, her voice echoing in my mind. "You can't escape what you are." "No!" I cried, tears streaming down my face. "I don't want this! I don't want to be like him!" She stepped forward, her hand reaching out to touch my cheek. Her touch was cold, lifeless, and I shivered at the contact. "There is no cure," she whispered. "No escape. You must embrace it or it will destroy you." Behind me, the beast growled, the sound vibrating through the air. I turned, seeing my father's twisted form emerge from the trees, his eyes locked on me. I was trapped, caught between the monster and the ghost of my mother. And that's when I knew there was only one way out. The dagger. The same dagger my mother had used to end her life. It was still there on the altar, waiting for me. With a surge of desperation, I ran back to the altar, the beast hot on my heels. I grabbed the dagger, feeling its weight in my hand, the cold metal biting into my palm. I turned to face my father, the monster that had once been the man who raised me. "Please," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "I'm sorry." But there was no response, only the feral snarl of a creature that no longer knew love or mercy. He lunged at me, and with a scream, I plunged the dagger into his chest. The world seemed to stand still as the blade sank deep into his flesh, his body convulsing as the curse fought to hold on. But it was too late. The dagger had done its job. The light in his eyes flickered, then faded, leaving only emptiness behind. He collapsed at my feet, his body reverting back to its human form. My father, finally at peace. But the victory was hollow, the weight of the curse still heavy on my shoulders. I looked down at the dagger, now stained with fresh blood. My blood. I hadn't even felt it, but in my desperation, I had driven the blade into my own side as well. I could feel the warmth spreading, the darkness closing in around me. But as I sank to the ground, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The beast inside me was silent, the hunger gone. I had done it. I had stopped the transformation. But at what cost? The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was the figure of my mother, standing over me, her expression unreadable. "Beware," she whispered as everything faded to black. When I woke, the world was bathed in the soft silver light of the full moon. I was lying on the ground in the clearing, my body aching but miraculously whole. I blinked, trying to make sense of what had happened. The memories came flooding back. The dagger, the beast, my father, and the overwhelming darkness that had consumed me. But now that darkness was gone, replaced by a strange, unfamiliar lightness. I sat up slowly, expecting to feel the searing pain of the wound I had inflicted on myself. But there was none. I looked down, expecting to see blood-soaked clothes, but there was only the faintest scar, as if the injury had been healed long ago. My hands shook as I reached up to touch my face, half expecting to feel the coarse fur of the beast, but there was nothing but smooth skin. I was human. I pushed myself to my feet, my legs unsteady, as if I were learning to walk all over again. The air was cool, filled with the scent of pine and earth, but it was free of the suffocating weight of fear that had plagued me for so long. The moon shone down through the trees, its light bright and pure, not the ominous harbinger of doom I had come to dread. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of it all. I had been sure that I was lost, that the curse had claimed me just as it had claimed my father. But somehow, against all odds, I had survived. The curse was gone. And then I saw him. At the edge of the clearing, standing tall and whole, was my father. Not the twisted beast he had become, but the man I remembered from my childhood. The man who had loved me, who had tried to protect me from a fate he couldn't escape. He looked at me with eyes that were no longer filled with hunger or rage, but with the warmth and love I thought I had lost forever. "Dad?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He smiled, a sad, gentle smile, and stepped forward. "You did it," he said, his voice soft and filled with pride. "You broke the curse." I shook my head, tears welling up in my eyes. "But how? I thought I was going to become like you. I thought it was too late." He reached out, taking my hand in his. His touch was warm, real, and it grounded me in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. The curse was strong, but it wasn't unbeatable. Your mother, she tried to break it, but she didn't have the strength. You, though, you found the strength she never could. The strength to fight back. To choose love over fear. I looked into his eyes, searching for answers. "But the dagger, I thought—" He squeezed my hand gently, his expression softening. "The dagger wasn't meant to end your life, or mine. It was a test, a way to prove that you were stronger than the curse. By facing your fears, by confronting the darkness instead of running from it, you were able to break free. The wound healed because the curse was lifted the moment you made that choice." A wave of relief washed over me, the weight that had been pressing down on me for so long finally lifting. I had done it. I had beaten the curse, not by succumbing to it, but by refusing to let it define me. I looked up at the moon, its light now a symbol of hope instead of despair. "But what happens now?" I asked, turning back to my father. He smiled again, a lightness in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. "Now you live. You live your life free from the shadow of the curse, free to be who you were always meant to be. And I'll be with you, always." I felt tears spill over, but this time they were tears of joy, of release. I had spent so long fighting, so long afraid of what I might become, that I had forgotten what it felt like to hope. But now, standing here in the moonlight with my father by my side, I knew that I had a future free from fear, from bloodlust, from the darkness that had haunted my family for generations. "I love you, Dad," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. He pulled me into a hug, holding me close, and I felt the warmth of his love surround me like a blanket. "I love you too, my daughter," he whispered back. "And I'm so proud of you." As we stood there, embraced in the moonlight, I felt a sense of peace that I had never known. The forest was quiet, the night still, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for a new beginning. And as the first light of dawn began to break through the trees, I knew that it was a new beginning, not just for me, but for my father, for my mother, and for the generations to come. The curse was broken, the darkness was gone, and in its place was only light and love and the promise of a future I could finally believe in.